Hello everyone, I have some more traps for you in the Sicilian defense. So let's get started. E4, C5, knight F3, E6, D4, C takes D4, knight takes D4, A6, knight C3, bishop C5, bishop E3, and here's our trap for today. Not for today, but one of them. If knight F6, notice the feature in the position. The bishop is unprotected. Like I said, always look for unprotected pieces or pieces only protected one time. So we see the action of our E3 bishop on there. So what we do is we move this knight to E6. This bishop doesn't want to capture here on E3 because then we will follow up with knight takes queen. The queen is more valuable. So after, for example, D takes E6, then we simply exchange queens, D8 check, king takes D8, and bishop C5. Alright, so we start simple. Here's our next one. E5, C5, knight F3, E6. This is known as a Paulson variation because Louis Paulson used to play this way in the 1800s, as opposed to D6, which still keeps this bishop open. E6, the idea is to be able to get this bishop out. Okay, so E6, D4, C takes D4, knight takes D4, A6, and this is known as the Khan variation. Black does not put immediate pressure in the center, and it's kind of waiting for white to make this move. It's not really a mistake, but bishop b4, and the purpose of playing e6 has been accomplished. Okay, it's a little more to it than that, but I'm not doing an opening survey here, but just giving you little tidbits here and there as we go through these traps. So after a6, knight c3, and like I just showed you, bishop b4 would be good, but b5 has the idea of pushing, bring this bishop here and pressuring the center. So bishop d3, now queen c7, castle, d6, bishop g5, knight bd7, e5. Now, best move for black is just simply knight takes e5. But if d takes e5, can you see the combination? And what is a combination? Remember, combination is the combining of different features in the position. So all we have to do is think along those lines. Let's look at some of the features. We have this beautiful diagonal here, and we see what? Unprotected piece. I see another unprotected piece. Okay, so that's two things. I also see the king is a bit cramped. So that's three things. What can we do? Knight takes e6. Now we see, again, we're attacking the queen. And remember what I said about the light squares. Now if f takes e6, our next move would be queen h5. Why is queen h5 effective? Because after g6, we have this light square bishop here. We just simply take. Bishop takes g6, h takes g6, and queen takes g6. That will be mate. And that's what I was talking about. Combinations, combining the features and aspects of the position. So now that we revealed the combination, let's just go back real quick and look at the features, why it was possible. Remember, I pointed out this rook being unprotected in the light square diagonal. Now notice that rook that had nothing to do with the combination. That's the one point I want to make. The rook being unprotected had nothing to do with this combination working, nor did the queen being unprotected. But what it did, by you acknowledging these features in the position, it brings your attention to the light squares. This is one thing you see, is this beautiful light square diagonal. And then hopefully you're able to, from seeing the diagonal, the weakness on the light squares, hopefully this concept pops in your mind. The queen being unprotected also had nothing to do with the combination, but the fact that it's in the vicinity of the knight after knight takes e6 and pretty much has to be captured, that kind of brings the queen into the fray, so to speak. And this is why it's important to look at the features of the position. So after, again, knight takes e6, f takes e6, again, light squares. And the last feature we had pointed out was this bishop cutting off the dark square. And that's what finally makes the combination official. Before, it just being on here didn't look like it was doing much. Just basically looks like it's misplaced, because it looks like soon black will play h6 or something like that and just drive it away, or perhaps even bishop e7. But the bishop being here makes this combination work. So adding up the features together, or combining the features together, is very important. Alright, let's look at another one. Okay, e4, c5, knight f3, e6, d4, c takes d4, knight takes d4, knight f6. Let's make a bad move here for white. e5, right? We can challenge that. No, we can't. Again, you've seen this story before. Queen a5 check. Dark squares. Strikes back. And we win this pawn. Moving on. e4, c5, knight f3, e6, d4, c takes d4, knight takes d4, knight f6, challenging this pawn, knight c3, bishop b4, pinning the knight to the king, and now this pawn is on prise. e5, knight d5, and this is a known line. I think it's called the Sicilian counterattack or something like that. This is a known line that's known to be a little suspect for black, and we'll see why. Just looking at the position, it looks like it's pretty good. And the bishop has a knight pinned on c3. This knight is attacking and threatening to win the pawn. Problem is, in these positions, first of all, when black gives up this dark square bishop, it leaves all of these dark squares weak around the king. So that's usually a great trade-off, and you'll see that in other lines of the Paulson opening with e6. When this dark square bishop's traded off, these dark squares become extremely vulnerable to the remaining dark square bishop on the board. The second idea, again with the pawn on e5, where should white be concentrating his attack? In the area where he is strong and has more opportunity and has more space, and that, my friends, is on the king side. The third thing is the development. To win this pawn, black is basically going to cash in his development by trading pieces over here, and therefore he won't have any development, while white will have development and initiative. So let's see what happens. So after e5, knight d5, knight e4 is another line. But for here, this purpose, knight d5. Okay, here's queen g4, attacking the pawn here, and g7, and let's say g6, a3, right, attacking the bishop, and let's just say, for the purposes of our lesson here, queen a5. Now queen a5 looks great because this rook is unprotected. Therefore, pawn takes bishop, right, should not work, because simply the queen would just capture the rook on a1, right, and we don't want that to happen. So it looks like a great move. Furthermore, black has 3 pieces piled up on this poor knight, which is pinned. So even after a move like bishop d2, black should gain a pawn, right, and go ahead and material. And after moving, say, this knight out the way, right, then the e5 pawn is vulnerable with check. So it looks like black is in business. But let's see. Let's get rid of that. So after queen a5, what would you play? You can pause the video if you want to. All right. So after queen a5, what do you play? How do you get out of this? Do you play knight? Do you play knight here? What about knight here? What about just bishop d2? What would you play? All right. A takes b4, my friends. And after queen takes a1, look at that. Captures the rook and is threatening to take a piece. Black is looking good. But after knight b3, right, the gig is up. They finally found you. Right, there's no place for the queen to go. The queen is trapped. That's a nice trap to remember. Let's look at it again real quick. Right, knight f6, knight c3, bishop b4, e5, knight d5, queen g4, g6, a3, queen a5. That's the error. A takes b4, queen takes a1, and knight b3, trapping the queen. So that is a wrap on that. All right. Hope you like that one. I like that one. All right, let's look at one more. e4, c5, knight f3, knight c6, and we know from here, knight c6, we can go into accelerated dragons, Sveshnikovs, Kalishnikovs, what have you. D4, and let's make a suspicious looking move right here. What about E6? Right? We're transpose. We're going to a Benoni. Sometimes you have people doing funny stuff like this. The idea, of course, is if D takes C5, which is a horrible move because you're just helping your opponent develop for nothing. Bishop takes C5 and black is equalized already. So of course you don't want to do nothing dubious like that. You take the game into Benoni territory and take the space here. So D5, E takes D5, E takes D5, and let's say knight C E7. Now let me just tell you that white is winning here already after just D6 and say knight F5, queen E2. So white is already winning, first of all. Okay, so but instead of D6, I'm sorry, instead of D6, white played knight E5. Knight E5, where now black should just simply just keep developing and either play knight F6, which is still kind of rough looking, but better than what's going to happen, or probably knight G6, just challenging this piece right away. And then the game could go knight C4 or something like that. Instead, black played D6, which looked respectable also because he figures, hey, I'm going to go into this Benoni position, just drive this knight away. But let's look at the features of the position. Always look at the color. Always check the colors, the color complexes, especially when you start seeing pawns congregated on the same color squares. Like that's the first thing I see. I'm just trying to, make you feel what I feel. Like when I see stuff like that, it's the first thing I say. I look for diagonals, and because the files aren't going to be open usually in the beginning of the game. It's hard to get an open file for the rooks. So the rooks are like kind of your last things that's really going to get play. Coming out of the opening and middle game is the minor pieces that are going to be, especially in short games, are going to win the games for you. So you look at this diagonal, man, and you'll see, boom, bishop b5 check. There's no defense, right? If knight c6, then you just take with the pawn, and then of course that wins a piece. You just take it, and then the queen will be lost. So that, my friends, is it for today, and I will see you on the next video. Please like and subscribe and comment and all of those things. All right, I will see you later, and good luck in your games. Okay, got that in there. Now I gotta remember